This is the departmental budget hearings. We do it every year. I think you can see in the computer what has been assumed for you. I'm going to work off the Trenton budget, but just to help me along. But we've assumed $94.5 million. I think we've tried to fund everything you've asked for. I think we've tried to anticipate retirements with your help. We've attempted to replace key personnel who are leaving. At the moment, this is the introduced budget. Of course, it can be amended by the time of the hearing, which is May 2nd. I would ask that you all come to that meeting that evening. The budget is typically amended by grants that come in after the budget's been introduced, but there is still the opportunity to amend the budget if you think something has been made or assumed in error. You've seen, I think you've seen the mayor's budget message, been online, it's on the website. I think he's very comfortable where we are. The revenues that we're assuming will result in a 4.87 cent tax increase, which is about $115 to the average property. So I think he's very comfortable staying where we are, but if there's anything that has not been assumed correctly in your divisions, please say so today or let me know by email. So having said that, anyone feel like they need to change any of the assumptions? Okay. Mr. Cradwell, you look like you represent the public. Do you have any questions or comments?
Yes, sir. Thank you for the opportunity to address you today. I do have a number of questions. Just briefly reviewed the budget. The first set of questions I wanted to ask is regarding payments in lieu of taxes.
Yes.
So I notice a little under 12 million for these payments in lieu of taxes.
Correct. For about 11.9.
Yeah.
11.6, excuse me.
And so I wanted to first of all understand that that's predicted based on the rates in the agreements. Are there any cases where the developments have been, or I should say the urban renewal entities have been exceeding the allowable profit and giving extra as outlined in the state law?
I would refer you to the chief financial officer on that one. He, I think, reviews an audit statement that's produced every year.
That's correct, Mr. Laughlin. We do get a report every year from each of the developers, and that is part of the report we get. So there are none that, sometimes there are, but in this particular year I haven't seen anything so far. But I haven't gotten all the audits yet because it's still very early in the season.
Okay, so sometimes it happens.
We do check for that, yes.
Okay. The housing authorities pilot payment, what is that based on? Is that based on the revenue they generate from their apartments, or is that some other?
It's a HUD formula-driven contribution. I don't know exactly what it is, but it seems to diminish every year.
I see. And it's currently being renegotiated, is that correct?
You've raised that question at a couple of council meetings. I know there's been some discussion. I haven't been a party to it. Maybe Mr. Shammy or Mr. Pettix can speak to that.
The agreement is being finalized. I don't believe the amount, the payment is being negotiated.
No, there is a HUD formula for the amount,
Right.
and they go through based upon the net rents. There is a copy of the document that Mr. Clark sends me each time with the check.
Okay, so it is based on the rental amount. Want to ask about the parking authorities pilot payment. Is that, I see it's anticipated to stay the same, but if, for instance, they were to sell the large vacant former Fair and Mall site, would that potentially go down? Or is that based on just a fixed number? Is there any basis for this?
It's negotiated every year, and I believe that we will expect 4.9 million contribution regardless of what's sold. But that's something that the mayor, of course, would consider. This is his budget, but I would tell you that I think we need the 4.9 to support everything we have on the expense side.
Okay, so that's not based on a formula, that's just negotiated.
That's a negotiation.
Okay, and Rutgers, I see a pilot from them for, it says state property on sheet 5, $700,000.
Yes.
That's been pretty standard for all these years. Is that the only payment in lieu of taxes that Rutgers makes?
To my knowledge, yes.
And what is that based on? Is that a?
It is an agreement not to develop city land out by their log cabin facility or property, the Rutgers Gardens.
Okay, so they, does that agreement have a term, or is it just so long as they don't do it, they pay?
The agreement's been in place for at least 25 years, probably longer than that. I don't know what the term is on it.
Okay.
I consider it kind of open-ended.
And so for all the other, dozens and dozens of acres, hundreds of acres, probably, they don't pay any taxes?
They don't. The state believes they make us whole by some of their contributions a couple of lines ahead of that. I wouldn't agree with that, but that's their position.
Understood, that would be the state aid.
Yes.
Gotcha. And then the two major hospitals, are they going to be making any payments to the city this year for the land that they own?
I believe there is an assumption I think that might be included in the payment in lieu of, but I'll have to double check with you.
It is.
Okay, thank you.
And so relative to last year's payment, if I recall, Robert Wood chipped in, was it $500,000? And St. Peter's nothing?
St. Peter's pays a pilot on their CARES building.
Right.
And I forget the Robert Wood Johnson contribution, but it sounds
It was
along those lines.
1.5 million last year, and it'll be 1.75 million this year.
Okay.
So it's
Thank you.
good to hear. Move on to the Board of Education Shared Services Agreement. I see both a revenue and appropriation of $3.869 million.
Correct.
So I just want to be clear that the services included here are what?
They are, you can see the gross number on sheet 22, but it includes, they make a contribution towards our YSS after-school program. They pay us for the garbage and trash that we pick up for them. They make a contribution towards the parks maintenance of parks that are adjacent to their schools and essentially act as recess yards. Alice Jennings Archibald Park, Feaster Park, things like that. They make a sizable contribution towards the capital improvements at Memorial Stadium that we've undertaken over the last couple of years. That was by agreement. They make a contribution to the DARE program, the GREAT program, the in-school police security effort. They pay for our school crossing guards, or reimburse us for the school crossing guards. They make a contribution towards the Sister Cities program.
Okay, and so essentially all of that funds are at cost. The city
Yeah, we don't mark it up. That's
right, and you don't mark it down either. They don't get a discount.
no,
So
at cost, sure.
okay, the reason I ask is because I know I have concerns about these pilot agreements with developers because they cut the schools out of the picture. And some folks, I don't think anybody in here necessarily, but some folks have told me, oh, well, the schools benefit because of these shared services agreements, but in reality, they're just getting the services at cost. There's no...
We're not, I don't believe we're discounting. It's at cost.
Okay, so they're paying full price essentially for whatever shared services they're getting through the city. They're not...
That's fair.
Okay.
I mean, they are a type 2 district. They get to fund what they think they need. Whether pilot revenue flows to them or not. I mean, they are in control of their own spending plan.
Understood.
Okay.
Moving on, I noticed the Rutgers Neighborhood Patrol Team was funded in 2017. It's not in this budget yet. Is that just because the grant hasn't come through yet, or are we expecting to see that come to an end?
I think we're unclear about the status of the grant, but in the police budget, we did assume a $100,000 contribution from them for overtime on Big Ten football game Saturdays, and probably the nights thereafter.
Okay. Could you ask somebody from the police department if the neighborhood patrol team is currently functioning? Are they still doing the joint patrols?
Chris or Tony, could you speak to that?
I don't believe it's active right now. It's more for the Rutgers football games to supplement all the students get the bars or something like that for security.
Okay. Cable TV fees, I notice, are increasing to about $200K. Just want to understand what that money goes to. Is it earmarked for anything, or does it just go into the general fund?
Goes into the general fund.
Okay. As I'm sure you've heard me request for years now at the city council meetings, I think some of that should go towards making sure the city's cable TV channel is working, and that the city council meetings are shared with people who have access to that channel. Is there any possibility that's going to happen in the next year? I know it's been talked about as
I have heard you say that many times, but I can't answer the second part of the question. I don't know if that's going to develop this year or not.
I see sale of municipal assets.
Yes.
Can you tell me what's going to be sold? It's like $800K?
We're selling 938 Somerset Street for $75,000. That was done by negotiation, I believe. And you probably have seen that on the council agenda before.
Yes.
And then we are also accepting $727,000 from NJ Transit for some acquisitions and some easements behind the DPW yard. They're looking to build a maintenance shop and an area to get trains off the tracks during major storm events, and they're developing the land back in there. Some of it they need to acquire from us, some just needs to be done by easement.
Thank you. Moving on to water and sewer surplus. I found it a little unusual to see a water surplus in 2017 and then a sewer surplus in 2018, but not the inverse. Is that because it's basically all coming from the same thing?
What pages are you on, Charlie?
I won't have to look it up here, but so it's under revenue.
Yeah.
So
Sheet 4?
10, I believe.
10.
Utility operating surplus of prior year. So
Yes.
I see water.
There was no surplus that the water utility generated at the end of 2017 that we could assume in this budget. And in the sewer utility, there was a $1.2 million surplus at the end of 2017 for us to assume in this budget.
Okay. Could either you or the water director kind of explain why you think that is, that there was no surplus this past year for the water, and why there was a $1.2 million for the sewer?
I will let Mark speak to that. I will just remind you that in the water budget, we sometime in November, I think, had to declare a $300,000 emergency where their spending exceeded their budget authority, and we had discussed why that was the case at a couple of meetings. But Mark, do you have any?
Yeah, the actual goal for that was the addition of the activated carbon system for the water treatment coming from the DNR Canal project that we did. So it was, purchasing of the equipment and then also the purchasing of the product itself. That was, unanticipated.
And I guess things are just looking up at this sewer utility. It's
We got a $340,000 refund from NCUA last year, so we had a good year.
I wanted to ask about that. The refund would be for what reason? They overcharged?
They overcharged.
Interesting. How did that
They
happen?
strike a budget early in the year. We make 4 quarterly payments, and if our actual charges come in under that, they refund the difference. If our charges go over that, we then add that amount to the, the following year's budget.
Thank you. I noticed UDAG reimbursement still going on. Can you just tell me like how much longer that might be happening? It actually increased this year, I believe.
I don't think it's an infinite pot of money. I don't know what the 2019 budget would assume or needs, but so I can't really answer it, but it's not it's not an infinite source of revenue.
This is like dating back to the 80s, right?
UDAG was pretty popular in the 80s, maybe even the 90s. 70s, 80s.
Okay, so these are basically recipients of
Grants
the...
that have been recycled or loans that have been repaid,
Right.
where UDAG funds were first used.
Okay. I noticed a new line item for NBPAC debt service reimbursement. I don't see any, money in this year for that, but I just want to understand what that is and what impact that'll have on future budgets.
I'm going to refer that to Mr. Pettix.
The structure of the deal with the New Brunswick Cultural Center kind of caused the payments, the pilots that are going to be coming from that project, we're going to pay the debt service. Probably I shouldn't have even put the line item on there because initially I just posted it as a revenue and as a debt service payment, but since a lot of with the interest, the first year's worth of interest was capitalized, so I can pay it out of the ordinance. So, but it is going to be kicking in probably in the 19 budget or 2020 budget, where the debt service is going to be paid by the pilot coming in here from the project.
Right, the city already borrowed was it 18.5 million?
It was 16 point something million dollars, correct?
Okay, so the pilot will go to pay that, and that's guaranteed to cover it, assuming, or guaranteed to cover it no matter what, but if the project does better than the minimum, then then we'll see that added to the pilot number.
That's
the
correct.
overall. Okay.
The minimum of the pilot is going to be the debt service, to pay the debt service.
Right.
If rents go up, if the market totally changes and they're able to collect more rent, the city will participate in that as well.
Gotcha. So moving on to appropriations, I have just one item that stood out to me. I see YSS, a major increase in the salaries and wages.
Right.
Can you explain that?
Nothing really happened in YSS except for really two major events. Dave Blevins retired and we promoted Ivan Adorno to the title. But this budget in its gross is about $1.8 million. The difference between what you see on this line is what we charge off against the Board of Education. The $3.8 million agreement that we were just talking about. So there, a lot of expense in YSS is netted out because of the contribution from the Board of Ed. And in this case, it's just that in this given year, we're charging less against the program than in the past. The number of employees I don't think has changed. There's a lot of seasonal, part-time people that we bring in during the summer. But really the major change in the organization was simply Dave's retirement and Ivan's promotion.
Thank you. Under water utility, sewer utility, I notice many millions of dollars in rents. I just want to understand what is being rented. Is that just the cell phone towers on the...
No, those are water charges.
Okay.
They're called rents, but they're water charges to our municipal customers. If you're looking at the water budget, you'll see two lines, rents, 11.3 million, and there's service to other systems. That's what we provide and then charge Franklin or Milltown. But the 11.3 is what we charge our own municipal customers.
Bill.
Yes.
Gotcha. And the MCUA refund I already asked about. I have just a few other quick items that I wanted to speak on and ask a couple questions. So under the change orders that exceeded 20%, I noticed two that are labeled equipment and labor. Can you just identify what?
What page are you on, Charlie?
The final page, I believe. Yeah. annual list of change orders approved.
Okay, I'm sorry, go ahead.
So there's two that are a little vague, equipment and labor. I just want to know, do you know what projects those were for?
I don't. Can look it up for you though.
Good enough. Does the budget include raises for the department heads?
It does.
Flat rate, or what is the?
At this point, less than 1%,
Okay.
sorry to say. I'm not sure that's exactly how the mayor will handle it, but that's what the budget assumes.
So like 0.8%? Something.
If you go to, let's see what page we're looking at. Mr. Pettix, give me some help on the page number.
Okay, page,
Salary adjustment, page sheet 17, $50,000, and we have $6 million worth of management, I shouldn't say department heads, management personnel.
I'm sorry, how many minutes?
We have $6 million worth of management salaries, and we've assumed $50,000 in salary adjustments.
And that's not just for the department heads?
It's for anyone who's considered a management employee.
Understood. Could somebody tell me the total amount of New Brunswick Parking Authority debt that is guaranteed by the city at this point in time?
I can't, I doubt Doug would probably want to look at the annual debt statement, but
I know it's about 300 and something thousand, or $1 million, but I have the exact number downstairs.
Okay, that's something you may have heard me raise concerns about as well in the past. I think that
I don't think that we've ever been called upon to protect the debt or pay someone's debt, a debt payment that the parking authority couldn't make.
understood. Hope that never happens, and I think that the parking authority should refrain from borrowing more money until that 300 million is far lower. That's just my opinion. Body cameras, not included in the budget. I heard a gentleman ask about it at the council meeting. I think that, I don't have an exact figure on how much you guys pay the JIF to, provide coverage for lawsuits, but there are a number of lawsuits against the police department every year. New Brunswick's not unique in that regard, but having body cameras is something that can limit, one, potentially the number of lawsuits, and two, the amount that you have to spend defending them. If there's video evidence that exonerates the police, it can make things much smoother across the street in the courthouse. And I know lawyers can end up charging tons and tons of money, sometimes far outstripping the cost of any settlement that might result. And I'm just concerned that the police have for years said they want body cameras, but there appears to be $0 appropriated for it in this budget. Can you tell me, or maybe ask the police to tell us, have they taken the first step, which would be getting a ballpark figure on what it would cost to implement in maybe several different scenarios of rolling it out? Do they have any approximate figure of what it would cost if they did want to include it in the budget? I'd like to know what that cost is.
Chris or Tony, can you speak to that?
I don't know. I could refer it to Captain Miller. I'm sure he can get you whatever information you need. I don't have any specific numbers or anything.
Okay. I've had very, good conversations with police officers, and I think some of them want the body cameras, and I think we should do what we can to support something that most people can agree is a good move. So I think that's where we have to start, and I'm disappointed to not see it in the budget. I think, lastly, the only other thing I wanted to ask about and talk about a little bit is transportation and the buses in New Brunswick. As you know, I put together a whole presentation, shared it with you, shared it with the Traffic Commission about the current state of affairs, and some kind of vision for how it could be improved. Can you tell me how much is going to bus transportation? I know the dial ride's at 56,000. I saw in here, maybe I'm misreading it, but I think 56,000 for that program, and my understanding is that comes from a grant. Is the
Partially funded by a grant, yeah.
Okay, and is the city going to continue its contribution to the county to support the M5 shuttle? Is that included in this?
I don't know the answer to that. I think our contribution towards the Brunswick shuttle is fully funded. Glenn, can you speak to the M5? I'm not sure.
County is looking to contribute to us to run the M5 shuttle.
Okay.
Okay, but that's not accounted for in the budget here.
It's
We
not
haven't
contract,
assumed that.
We're negotiating.
So it would be kind of a reversal of roles, turning the tables. Instead of the city contributing to the county to run the shuttle, the county wants to contribute to the city to run the
I have
shuttle.
heard people say, and it's probably been Glenn, that the county wants to get out of the transportation business, but I've also
Or at
heard
least the
many of
shuttle
our
business.
people think that this is it should be really a regional solution, not just a municipal solution.
Well, I did have a very productive conversation with the Traffic Commission just yesterday, and I think that it might be wise for the city to step up and take on this. Anything that puts the city at the center of a transportation network is something that's going to be good for businesses, good for our residents, and ultimately good for getting cars off the road, solving the parking problem, and addressing climate change. So I do think that while it may seem like a daunting task to start running a bus system, you can start small with this one route and work with Rutgers, who already has a contract with a provider that runs the largest university bus system in the country. They get the best possible price from them. I think it's very doable, and I think it's something that the city should welcome and appropriate what needs to be appropriated. If hires have to be made, if purchases have to be made, that should be that would be a wise investment, in my view. And I hope that the city ultimately agrees and ultimately puts some of its resources towards improving the bus system here. It's something that could really move the city forward. A lot of people, want to live here, want to move here, but our bus system is lacking. It could be better, and I think that, working together with partners, if the county wants out, let's help them get out, let's get in. And so I hope that happens. Can you tell me?
Maybe we shouldn't let them out. Maybe they want to be a partner to a good area-wide transportation system. But anyway, your points are well made. Thank you.
Thank you very much. And just, is there anything else in the budget regarding bus transportation besides dial ride and, this potentially going to M5?
I didn't bring the capital budget with me by accident, but I know we have a number of substantial, at least road reconstructions, and we are funding our contribution towards the re-engineering of the intersection of Albany Street and Easton Avenue, which I think is probably a meaningful, at least public safety and transportation improvement. It's not necessarily a bus system as you're suggesting, but we've got a number of projects like that have been funded, but I don't think there's anything in the budget other than what we've just discussed, dial ride. The senior center has their own transportation. The YSS does rely on some bus drivers to move kids around. Our contributions towards Brunswick, and Glenn spoke about the county, but I don't think there's anything else in the budget in addition to that.
Just to be clear, there's no contribution to Brunswick at this point, is that correct?
I think we make it, no, Glenn says no. All right,
Okay. So
I learned something.
yeah, so that's a good example. There was money going to this thing, and maybe there's a reason, a good reason to appropriate a similar amount to make sure that thing is serving the people in New Brunswick, because that was a good thing that was started. I know Mr. Patterson was involved in getting that grant, and I kind of feel like that bus is on autopilot now. It's just kind of driving around and not necessarily getting a lot of riders like it used to, and Sometimes it's not even marked properly, and, you know, these are things that, you know, with a little bit of devotion to the overall transit issue, I think we could put together a cohesive system where the partners are all working together and ultimately benefit the residents first and foremost. So I just want to put it on the table. I'm totally willing to help in a constructive way, whatever way I can. I know I've sent you the presentation.
I
And
heard your presentation as well.
yeah, so
Okay.
thank you for the time.
Sure, no problem. Thanks, everyone.